First film, let's start with the obvious one. Spider-Man 1. Oh, that's a dumb picture. Most people consider Spider-Man's 1 and 2 to be like seminal works of art sent down from the heavens to deliver us from evil. Other people, like Cosmonaut Variety Hour, acknowledge how incredibly silly these movies are. And there's something to be said about that. Generally, when something is memed or has meme appeal, it's easy to dismiss it as either bad or just like a cutesy, funny thing. But think about it. In order for something to be memeable, it has to be iconic. And Spider-Man 1 definitely is iconic. A lot of people refer to scenes in this first movie because it does so many things right. Like, for instance, the origin story. People have been copying this origin story for years because it's just done right. I have only a handful of origin stories that I like that have been done well on screen. This is one of them. Another one would be Iron Man. I think that's a great origin story. Batman Begins, delicious origin story. Wonderful movie. Some of the action is a bit silly, but for the most part, it holds up surprisingly well for a movie made in 2002. That said, this movie is not without its flaws. The casting, for one, while I understand why they cast slightly older actors, it is a bit silly to see grown men playing high schoolers. I know people that hate Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, like with a passion. Can't stand this man as Spider-Man. I think he does a good job as Peter Parker, but his Spider-Man's not the best. I think he's kind of neutral as Spider-Man. It's not just the fact that he doesn't quip, but you have to take every opportunity you can to express the hero's personality. And the only way this Spider-Man does that is through his movement and his action scenes. The script is incredibly cheesy. Like, imagine being an actor signing up to play a part in this movie and going through the script and reading lines like, "It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind," or
"No one says no to me."
Now, because they cast some brilliant actors to play some of these parts like Willem Dafoe, they make a lot of these lines work, but on paper, some of it is relentlessly cheesy. Giving him organic web fluid is kind of weird. I mean, it's alright. It's something you get used to over time. It's an acquired taste. And I think there was still a bit of an obsession in those days to make everything organic, biological. They did that with Scorpion in the 90s when they decided to change his spear into bad PS1 graphics and then shove him up his hand. The Burton Batman films had some characters that bordered on the supernatural, possessing multiple lives or flippers for hands, even though in the comics they're just people. And here it kind of takes away from his intelligence a bit, no? I mean, the whole point of the web fluid was that he made it himself without having access to Dexter's frickin' lab. So it was meant to be a kind of showcase of his intelligence more than anything.
Who manufactured that?
I did.
But it's different, and in the grand scheme of things, different is good. Usually. It kind of sings to the kind of movie that this is. A lot of campiness combined with some gruesome undertones. It's got a kind of visceral feel to it. And in between, there's a lot of heartfelt talk about becoming a man and taking up responsibility. It's a very particular interpretation of Spider-Man, and that's why people tend to love it or hate it. By the way, take a look at this scene real quick.
Oh.
That cracks me up every time. This is not an accident. Someone had to deliberately, either while directing or while editing, go in there, go through the footage, and decide that during what becomes a grave death scene, that they should slip in a quick frame of Willem Dafoe looking all goofy and going, oh, which makes the whole scene a cartoon. It's literally a cartoon, and is one of those things where on paper it seems like it ruins the scene, yet I can't stop laughing, so it's doing something right. You kind of go in and out of laughing with the movie and laughing at the movie, but that scene was definitely intentional, and I think it perfectly sums up the tone of this film. Serious, grave death scene with a WTF moment embedded in it. Speaking of, it has a great villain. I'd be remiss not to mention that, because what followed not long after this film was a long list of inept, hyper bad villains, like badly written, insipid. So yeah, great villain, great characters, good story, one of the best origin stories out there, incredibly campy, somewhat stupid, and yucky. It's all of those things. That is Spider-Man 1. So we're gonna put it we're gonna make this as we go along. Let's put it here. Good but flawed. There we go. Spider-Man 2. Everyone loves to lick this movie's balls. This is like the definitive superhero film for the Raimi fanboys. I'm gonna tell you right now, I prefer Spider-Man 1. So it's also good, it's also flawed, but it's not as good as this movie. Timmy, a lot of it isn't its fault because it goes for the dreaded losing your powers motif, which inevitably means that you're gonna have a slightly more drawn out, boring middle act, which this movie does. It kind of drags. That said, it does mitigate a lot of the damage by injecting humor, injecting a lot of heartfelt scenes, and still having Peter do some rescuing because he just can't help himself. Like when he goes into the burning building to rescue the little thing, child. That's the word I'm looking for. By the way, there's always a burning building in these movies. Then there's the humor aspect, which gets a little bit out of hand. I still like it, but the amount of shit that Peter gets in this movie is phenomenal. Like, you stop to take it seriously after a while. It almost breaks the movie. Like, you can't buy that the universe is this deliberate in knocking Peter down. Everything is horrible. Everything is miserable. That said, I do like a couple of these scenes, like when he's at the party and he keeps trying to get a drink. I like this bit at the end where he grabs one, all cool and casual, yet it's empty. It's just a good running gag. Mary Jane's a little bit creepy in how she keeps trying to manipulate Peter. I didn't think much of it first time I saw the movie, which goes to show what kind of girls I knew growing up. It's fine. People do this kind of dumb shit for love, like, get engaged to a man you don't love just to spite the man you do. That's great. And once again, a good villain. However, not as good as the first one, in my opinion, for several reasons. Both of these go for the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of deal, except the second one not so much, because as soon as Otto becomes Doc Ock, Octavius is pretty much out of the picture. This is a different person now. This is sentient AI, man. There's no such thing as the delicious conflict between the two personas like in the first one, so it's a bit less nuanced. He's still good. Like, the scenes with him as Octavius are really good. Like, this actor really shines in this role. And the scenes with him as Doc Ock are really funny. Who knew that sentient armed robots would be funny?
You're getting on my nerves.
I have a knack for that.
Not anymore.
Butterfingers.
So yeah, Spider-Man 1 to me is the better movie. It's got the better structure, it's better paced, it's got a slightly better villain, but I'm still gonna do something I'm probably gonna hate myself for in the morning. I'm gonna put this one before it. For one reason. You see, I'm a sucker for fight scenes, and this movie, to this day, has one of the best superhero fight scenes I have ever seen. Some fight scenes are good because they're very technical. Some fight scenes are very good because they're treated as storytelling devices and they further the story or the characterization. This one is just awesome. Like, there's probably some of all that other stuff, and there's a lot of technical aspects, there's some storytelling, but it just, at the end of the day, it's a triumph of the awesome. Every frame of it is splendid. There is not a single ounce of fat on this fight. There's no fluff. It just goes from awesome moment to awesome moment to awesome moment. Now, of course, in terms of realism, it's absolute shit, because I don't know if you noticed, but Otto isn't wearing any body armor, any kind of protection for his actual body whatsoever. So a single punch from Spider-Man should be enough to take him out of commission, and Doc Ock eats a lot more than that during this fight scene. So that's stupid, but from a visual and cool factor perspective, this fight is absolutely amazing for a film made in 2004 or whenever it came out. I cannot believe how well it holds up. So yeah, this one's objectively better, but I'm a subjective piece of shit who loves fight scenes, so there you go. Let's do The Amazing Spider-Man, and this will be a hot take, first of several probably, because I don't think this movie's that bad. Don't get me wrong, I didn't like it that much when I first watched it, but a lot of that was due to circumstance. This movie had the misfortune of not just being released after these movies, it also had to change what it wanted to do with itself because of it. It couldn't just do this story again. So it went for the more gritty, realistic Peter. Now, right off the bat, this movie isn't as visually spectacular as the other ones. Like, the fight scenes aren't that engaging. They're still good and the CGI is great, but there's nothing like the train fight from Spider-Man 2. And the whole plot line with Peter's parents and him being the chosen one, like making him the only person who was compatible with the spider's DNA, I think that's bullcrap. You don't need it. Spider-Man already has a good father figure by way of Uncle Ben. Adding another father figure, particularly an absent one that keeps trying to divert screen time away towards himself, it just muddies the whole thing. That said, let's talk about some of the the good. I really like this Peter Parker. Yeah, he's a bit douchey and kind of cooler looking, but ultimately I think that's a good thing. Like, I've given this a lot of thought. Because if Peter is wholesome and good before tragedy hits him and wholesome and good after tragedy hits him, there's no contrast there. There needs to be a bit of a dichotomy. I think making Peter a bit more callous or just douchey before losing Uncle Ben makes a lot of sense, because then there's actual contrast. Then he has to change his ways and become a hero, and it makes you wonder what kind of person he would have been otherwise. It's coming of age stuff. He's meant to embody the quintessential teen. When you go through puberty, you don't really know what's happening to you. Every emotion is dialed to 11. You don't know what kind of man or woman you're going to become, and you just have to figure it out. And I think this movie perfectly embodies that. Also, Andrew has great chemistry with Emma Stone, something the movie is very much aware of and tries to milk as much as possible, especially in the second one.
I just figured out the next crowd. No more this.
Here, I think it works well. The villain was kind of uncompelling. He could have been done way better. The manner in which Uncle Ben dies is very contrived. That could have been done better too. But there are some really good moments in this movie, like the bridge scene, which I think even haters have to acknowledge is kind of good. That's when he really becomes Spider-Man. And Andrew's just funny. I think he's the only one who does a good Peter Parker and a good Spider-Man. And I wholly believe that if you trim enough fat and enough stuff that doesn't work, then you're left with an actually good movie. I think there's a good movie hiding in this, and it wouldn't be that hard to reorder some scenes, re-edit some scenes, maybe add a couple new scenes and bring that to light. So I'm gonna put it here. Diamond in the rough. That's what it is to me. There's a lot of dirt and grime and stuff that would need to be removed, but it's not a bad movie. By the way, here's another hot take. I think this is my favorite suit. Everyone shits on this suit. Everyone says his head looks like a basketball. I like it. It's sleek, it's modern, I love the texture of it, I love the eyes, and it makes sense that this would be the kid's first suit. Now, you want to become a vigilante, you want to become like a superhero, you're gonna obviously go overboard a bit first time you make your suit. You're gonna want to pump as much cool as you can into it. Anyway, moving on. Amazing Spider-Man 2 is S tier.
What?
Excuse me, I have to go and vomit.
No, I'm kidding. Look, we'll set it here for now. Don't panic. I hate this movie. No matter how much I reflect on it, with this, I reflected on it and it kind of brought me into a better place as a result. It doesn't matter how much I rationalize or focus on the good. If I go back and watch this, I will still get the urge to hurt myself, right? It is a bad movie. And unfortunately, despite some really good scenes, I can't make the same statement as I did with this. You can't just chop off the bad and be left with a good movie. You'd be left with a couple good scenes. So you'd have to add a lot to restore it or to make it better. One of the problems with this movie is that it's such a jarring tonal shift compared to its predecessor. Like, Spider-Man 1 wanted to be the gritty, real-world version of Spider-Man. Like, it wanted you to believe that this could actually take place in the real world, minus the lizard gas. But this one starts off with Peter being all goofy and utter destruction happening several times throughout this movie, and it's just played for laughs. It tries to be more like the older Spider-Man movies, but it just misses the mark a bit. It also doubles down on Gwen and Peter's relationship, which I think is a bit gratuitous at this point. Like, half the movie is just them literally mumbling at each other. And then you had the multiple villains and the Osborn disease and the mechanical rhino and the fucking spy parents. Let me remind you that the whole point of that plotline was so that Peter could get angry arbitrarily at some point in the movie, smash an old calculator thingy, discover some special tokens, randomly go to a subway station, one of many, use them in a thing he finds there, have a train magically pop out from under the ground containing a secret recording of his father meant to tell Peter that he was always meant to be Spider-Man. That's it. After this point, we forget that his parents even existed. This strains credulity. You can remove this entire subplot and the whole film is better for it. It's 10 times better for it. So yeah, it's a stupid movie, but like I said, it's got some really good things going for it. Andrew Garfield is still great as Spider-Man. Emma Stone is still great as Gwen. Gwen's death scene was sublime. I'm not kidding. It was unironically sublime. I don't think we could have hoped for better. The way it's shot, the little touches on top of that, Garfield's acting, that was the one point where I forgot what film I was watching. I forgot all the dumb shit and the useless characters and the teeth gap. This, once again, reminds me that this could have been a good movie. And of course, the amount of time that the film devotes to Peter grieving after that. I think that's also brilliant. There's a nice dichotomy there because the first death turned him into Spider-Man, while the second death almost broke him. He was ready to quit. I would say this is a good movie with a lot of bad shit in it. This is a bad movie with some good stuff in it. So it's not a diamond in the rough. This will be pebble, a gate. How do you even pronounce that?
Agate.
Zirconium in the rough. There you go. Something cheaper. Let's pick up the pace. Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, I can't fully explain why I don't like this movie. I can try, but we'd be here all day. I actually scripted an entire long-form video just to try to explain why I don't like this movie to myself. Because for the longest time, I acknowledged that there's a lot of good scenes and good stuff that I like in this movie. Yeah, when I watch it, I just find it fucking boring. I don't know, it's unengaging to me. And that's kind of it. That's how I describe it. There are a lot of good scenes in this movie. A lot of scenes that I genuinely like the rubble scene, obviously, the dad talk. I love what they did with the villain. I love the Vulture. Have you seen the Vulture in the comics? Ew. You know how the Suicide Squad was a collection of scenes that on their own weren't that bad, but when strung together into a movie, it just didn't make any sense. Like, you could watch Harley's introduction, you could watch Deadshot's first scene, you can watch a lot of these scenes by themselves, and they're pretty cool, but they don't come together to form an enjoyable movie. That's kind of how I feel about this. Like, there's a lot of scenes that I would watch and rewatch dozens of times and enjoy them, but I would not enjoy sitting down and watching this movie from start to finish again. It's just, it drags. Much like Spider-Man 2, this movie has a lot of structural problems that result from circumstance. This Peter's already been bitten, so he can't do the origin story. You've lost an opportunity to innovate there. He's already been with the Avengers, so whatever this is going to have to be a step down from that. He doesn't get to interact with Mary Jane very much. He doesn't get to interact with Gwen Stacy. He gets to interact with Liz, which immediately makes you uninvested in the romance aspect, because I know she's going to get booted out by the end of the film. And the structure of this movie is such that he doesn't get to do much. That's literally the plot of the film, is that he feels he's underused, underappreciated, he doesn't have a lot of crime to fight. And yeah, that's funny, like Spider-Man do a flip and all that, but it's boring. It doesn't make for an engaging movie. This movie really tries to be the slice of life Spider-Man. It tries to be a slice of life story. And I don't necessarily hate slice of life, but I think it's really hard. I think it's very hard to get right. It's very hard to make it engaging. And a lot of the slice of life stuff that I wish I would have seen is not in the movie. Like Peter goes to a party. That would have been a wonderful opportunity to see him interact with his peers, to have some fun scenes. But he doesn't actually stay at the party. Then he goes to a ball, and he doesn't actually stay at the ball. That's right. The movie does it
twice.
And on top of that, I somehow find this movie to be so tiring. Like, they wanted teenage Peter Parker, I get that, but he talks so much. He's always fucking hyper. And on top of that, his friend Ned also never shuts up. And on top of that, you have Karen the Terminator. This movie has a bad habit of shooting itself in the foot. Even the fight scenes, it chose to put the final battle on an airplane, which is not the best of arenas. I know it's pretty difficult for someone who's mostly grounded to take on someone who can fucking fly, but that's why you set this kind of a fight in the city, where Peter can leverage tall skyscrapers to modify his altitude. Yeah, this movie didn't really work for me. If given the choice, I'd rather watch this one instead of watching The Amazing Spider-Man 2 again, but other than that, it's just boring. Far From Home is fucking terrible. It's a joke. I can't literally call it anything else. If this movie's boring, then this one's boring times 10. A lot of the elements I like to see in my superhero films are up here. Pretty much none of them are down here, except maybe the reveal. Him revealing that he's Spider-Man to MJ, and her revealing that she knew all along, which was kind of hinted at in Homecoming. That was nice. But other than that, this isn't a superhero film. This isn't even like a hero film, or I don't know. It's teen comedy. Teen rom-com, and it's not even a good one. If you wanted to do a romantic comedy, you can do a romantic comedy, but then make it a good one. There are so many romantic comedies that I actually like, but this isn't even that. It's just the level of humor in this film is B-tier sitcom at best. Similarly, the romance in this film is a joke. I don't buy it because it wasn't set up properly in the last movie. It was set up that Zendaya likes Tom Holland. It was not set up that Tom Holland likes Zendaya, yet he kind of just likes her now. Not just that, it's also Ned's romance with, what's her face? Like, I can't even call it a romance. It's treated like a joke. That's the thing, this movie treats itself like a joke. I can't even make fun of it like with Amazing Spider-Man 2 because it constantly makes fun of itself. This movie just puts me to sleep. Let's get Spider-Verse out of the way. I don't need to talk about this movie. You all know it's great. I don't think it's the best thing since Hot Water. I think that it does have flaws. For one, I think the pacing it's appropriate for an animation, but it's still kind of too much at times. I rewatched it recently and it's just like, it never stops. It becomes a bit overwhelming at times. Another thing is, and this is the reason why I rewatched it, because I wanted to confirm it, I don't really understand by the end of the film who Miles Morales is, like who this Spider-Man is. I don't necessarily see what contrasts him to other Spider-Man or to Peter's Spider-Man. I think there's a makings of a great origin to him, but he has a couple traits about him that make him stand out, and that's about it. Everything other than that is just like, he's smart like Peter is, he's top of his class like Peter is, has a good heart like Peter. Like, he doesn't even have the conflict that Peter had before he became Spider-Man. He genuinely wants to do good and help. His only thing is that he doesn't have faith in himself or something. So I think they could have given him more traits to stand out. But as a whole, everything else is chef's kiss. This is a Spider-Man movie, okay? These are good but flawed. This is Diamond in the Rough. This is boring, blah, blah, blah. This is a Spider-Man film. This is what it's supposed to look like. And now for the wild card. Now remember, this is a tier list I'm making at the start of 2022 after having seen the movie twice. Still fresh in my mind. I'm still bedazzled by it. So who knows? Maybe 1 year from now I'll change my opinion. But for right now, this is S tier. I stand by my review of this movie. Having seen it twice now, the second time with two of my friends who have wildly different tastes, and they both said it's good, so blame them. This movie has a ton of problems. It has some leaps in logic. The first act I still kind of hate because it's got a lot of this kind of DNA in it. It's got some out of place jokes, the sitcom stuff. The whole college thing, I don't really buy, particularly in 2022. Like, these are the stakes we're dealing with here. This is why Peter tries to alter reality. But they make it work by the end, I'll give him that. Electro shouldn't know who Spider-Man is. Also, I don't know if you realize, but Doc Ock says he had his tentacles around Spider-Man. He was about to kill him, which means it was right at the end of the movie when his science project was about to become self-sustaining, which means that when he's transported back, he's gonna die anyway. Peter Parker cured him for nothing, because he still has to sink the thing in the water. So, oopsie. But yeah, everything else about this movie is great. I like the way they utilize the other Spider-Man. I like how he gives himself a pep talk, basically. Interdimensional pep talk. I like the death scene. I like the gravitas. I like how Peter grows at the end of this. I love the finale where he chooses not to tell his friends that he's Spider-Man, which means he's finally learned his lesson, and he takes the secret identity thing seriously, which Marvel has never done. Yeah, it's the closest thing to a live-action Spider-Verse that we're gonna get for a while. Actually, I feel like I shouldn't even place this movie here. It being animated is kind of cheating. You can do so many cool things with full-on animation that you can't with live action. Live action is a crutch when it comes to visuals and visual storytelling. But I'm gonna leave it there. These two are in no particular order. They're good. Watch them with your friends. And that's it. We're done, right? Oh. We arrive then at Spider-Man 3, and this might be the hottest of all takes because I think that despite all the hate it gets, I think it might actually transcend the superhero formula. A deft deconstruction that takes the Spider-Man character to a whole other. I'm only joking, it's a piece of shit. I fucking hate this movie with a passion. This is offensively bad. There is nothing redeemable about this movie to me. This doesn't do it justice. Hold up. I don't know, nothing I write here does it justice. I hated it as soon as I laid eyes on it, and it aged about as well as Keith Richards in a septic tank. Spider-Man literally asks this girl to help him cheat on his girlfriend, and then has the gall to try and propose to her later on. You know, this scene of him trying to preserve the ring would have been very heartfelt and poignant, if not for the fact that he acted like a total douchebag just a few scenes prior, making me not give a shit. This could have easily been just a Spidey versus New Goblin film, or a Sandman film, or a Venom film, but some cretinous corporate cunt that shall forever go unnamed and unpunished thought it was a good idea to do all of these at the same fucking time, which means that all of them get mere droplets of screen time, which means all of them suck. And I'd like to zoom in on the latter one, because after 14 years I still fail to understand how the fuck they thought it was okay to write, and then the symbiote crash lands on Earth not 5 fucking feet away from Peter Parker and nobody notices in the script, and leave it at that. That's like finishing the foundation of the Chrysler building and then skipping all the way to the fucking flagpole. Moreover, Peter shows this thing to another human being, and a scientist at that, and instead of being at least somewhat fazed by what looks to be an alien organism, or at the very least a previously undiscovered bit of local fauna with never before seen properties, Dr. Connors just goes, "Huh. That's strange. How very odd." He probably knows Peter has more of that stuff, and he just lets him leave with it, figuring it'd make as good a pet as any cat. Yeah, you're fine as long as you don't let the sentient, ultra-sticky parasite touch you. Just buy a leash for it. And wash your hair. Not to mention all the abominable cliches like the love triangle, or rectangle, or pentangle, or whatever it is, or the, "Oh, it wasn't him, it was this never-before-seen character that we just squeezed out of our bunk holes," which, considering he's made of sand, that must have been pretty painful. Huh. Or the convenient memory loss, or Harry's idiot butler who decides to wait 3 goddamn movies to spoil the plot of Spider-Man 1 to him. And I could go on, but we'd be here till New Year's. Actually, what was the point of establishing Brock and Gwen's relationship? I don't even remember seeing the two of them together. What was the point of this guy? Why the heck was he in the film? And yeah, as with the other two, there's some cool action scenes. I'll give the movie that, but it
Doesn't change anything.
This is a troll movie. This movie did to its characters what Harvey Weinstein did to his secretaries. It's the bottom of my list, possibly any list. I renounce it, I hate it, and I'd rather get run over by an embarrassingly small car than watch it again.
When they say that a hero can save us, I'm not gonna stand here and wait.
Actually, Civil War Spider-Man's the best.